Recovery from alcoholism is not easy. The biggest step you take is admitting the problem and taking the road toward solving it. I had long since given up hope in quitting of my own free will and found myself turning to God for answers. I sat in the bottom of my shower, the water long since turning cold but still pelting my aching body. I cried out for some sort of relief for the torment, and a voice responded within my mind, "Let my will be done." The words continued to play as if on repeat as I prepared for my workday. I shoveled ibuprofen down my throat to ease the pounding in my head and exited my house. The voice was a distraction from my duties, so I tried to tune it out. I knew it was important, but I had always put my job before so many things, even my well-being. I always told myself that if I could make it through a few hours in the office, I could numb my pain again with alcohol in the evening. I knew it was not an answer to my problem, but it was all I could manage anymore. My headache did not ease. It actually became even more difficult to ignore. The pressure surged behind my left ear, and a strange tingling coursed down my left arm and leg. A panic set in, which only served to make it worse. I was sure I was going to have a heart attack or a stroke at any moment. I asked a coworker to take me to the emergency room, to which he obliged. God was done waiting for me to listen. The doctor on call for the emergency room listened as I admitted my fault. She looked at me with pity, which made me feel even worse. I felt pathetic crying there in that tiny hospital gown. I was still holding on to the idea that I should have been strong enough to beat this on my own. A nurse came in shortly after with a small plastic cup with a tiny white pill inside. She tells me it was Xanax and that it would help with my anxiety and my withdrawal symptoms. I know what Xanax is. I've witnessed many people abuse it as a teenager. Just the implications of ingesting it were frightening. Would I be trading one addiction for another? They assured me that it would help, and I relented. The pill went down quickly, and in time it eased my pain. My wife had watched through tears, wondering if I would survive this ordeal, but the doctor assured her that if I were willing, that I could live through this. I bowed my head to pray for the first time in a long time. I begged God for His help and asked to be saved from this torment my life had become. I gave in to His will and asked to be shown the way. The following days would be a testament to that. I set aside the alcohol and put forth an effort to be more than the man I had been before. I tried to put God first and my family second. I wanted to leave it all behind me. By week's end, I made it a point to find my place in a pew at church. I needed to change my routine, get back to a place of peace, and do whatever it took to keep the bottle out of my hand. The only trouble was that I was still relying on that pill. That tiny white object silenced the screaming in my head and slowed the quake of my body. It was a relief and a curse all in one. The following week was when the ringing began. It started as a low, almost inaudible hum in my right ear, the kind of noise that is simply annoying but not unbearable. I crudely shoved my pinky finger in the canal and wiggled it about as if trying to remove some small instrument that was creating the sound. It passed as quickly as it came. The instance was so easily dismissed, but much like the trumpet that sounds for judgment, it was but a sign of things to come. Unfortunately, I did not understand the warning, and the sound slowly increased in volume over the following week. My habit had been to listen to talk radio on my commute to work. At random intervals, the broadcast would be interrupted by static, as if receiving a bad signal. I tried adjusting the station but found that it seemed to happen no matter what I was listening to. This was odd but not alarming, the kind of thing you mention jokingly to friends or family. I would forget about it, even happening for days on end before the incident would repeat itself, and I would be reminded of how strange it seemed. As the weeks passed, the static became more frequent, and when words bled through the blurred signal, I decided it was best to just turn off the radio completely. It was the same words as before. Let my will be done. The benzodiazepines I had been prescribed were not intended for prolonged use. The doctor at the emergency room wanted to help relieve my withdrawal symptoms while I was coming down from my dependency on alcohol. I knew I could not keep taking them, so after a few weeks of relying on them to quiet my mind, I decided to forego my nightly dose. I was awoken at 1 in the morning by the constant whispering of voices. Imagine lying in bed with people surrounding you, carrying on multiple conversations at the very same moment in quiet, low murmurs. Their words would be so tangled that you would be unable to make sense of any of them, but also so distracted by their consistency that it would make it impossible to sleep. That was how I spent my first night without medicine. When my alarm sounded the next morning, I was still awake, eyes bloodshot and staring at the glowing red numbers in front of me. I forced my way from the sheets and toward the bathroom. I relieved my bladder and splashed water on my face in an attempt to shake my exhaustion. I hobbled like a zombie toward the kitchen and leaned against the doorframe for a moment. My wife had already brewed a pot of coffee, and I eagerly helped myself to a large cup. I took a large gulp, but as soon as it hit my tongue, I forced it back out across the counter. The dark brown liquid made an odd Rorschach upon the bright white laminate countertop. "What the hell, John?" my wife yelled, grabbing a towel from the dish strainer. I stared at the image the beverage created and whispered, "It tastes horrible." My voice was disconnected and monotone. I was more concerned with the roundness of the coffee and the specks of white within that seemed to reveal a face. The eyes stared back as my wife's rant continued behind me. Her words were muffled though, my thoughts consumed by the face in front of me. The ringing started again and grew so loud that I could barely hear anything else. I shook my head to try to eliminate the annoyance, but it did not work. The sound came to an abrupt halt as my wife finished her sentence. I turned to look at her, confusion resting on my eyebrows. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" My words devoid of emotion. She pushed past me and wiped away my distraction. "I swear you never listen to a word I say." "Sorry, Catherine," I murmured before looking down in my cup. She took it from me and took a sip. It apparently tasted fine to her, so I tried another taste. The bitterness that had filled my mouth before was gone, and was replaced with the same brew I had become accustomed to. I tried to shake it off, along with the odd spill pattern, but I was almost positive I could not function at work with so little sleep. I called my boss to let him know the situation, and though he was frustrated, he tried to be understanding of the trials I was facing. He told me to rest up and to be in the morning. I returned to my room and closed all the blinds. I wanted to shut out all the light, but some still seemed to filter through. My body curled under the sheets, and I buried my head beneath my pillow. With the light smothered and my body hidden below the sheets, I was finally able to find rest. My eyes fluttered open to see that the house was dark. My clock read 5:30, which meant I had slept most of the day. I eased my way out of bed and into the living room. The house was eerily quiet. I called out for my wife, but received no answer. I glanced out the kitchen window to see that our car was not in the driveway. As I turned around, I noticed message scrawled across the dry erase board across from me. "Gone to store. Be back soon." I gave a slight smile as I opened the fridge. My fingers released the handle. The door hung wide as I stared in awe. Every inch of the refrigerator was filled with bottles of beer. My wife had promised to clear every ounce when I decided to get sober, and I could only wonder why she would fill it with my temptation. I slammed the door shut, my stomach churning at the thought of what lay beyond the door. My hands rested against the fridge and my eyes stared into milky reflection within the white of the door. The plastic beneath my hands felt as though it were vibrating. The door begged to be opened, and the circus of voices rose up within my mind. The noise grew louder and louder as the seconds ticked by. I wanted to cover my ears, but I knew if I released my hold on the fridge door, it would open. The voices became deafening as the doors began to fight violently to be free. I screamed out for all of it to stop, but I only received one response: let my will be done. With my will broken, I ripped the door open and removed one of the cans of alcohol. Within seconds, the amber liquid was down my throat and my sobriety. Dashed upon the rocks, but the voices had stopped. A smile slid across my lips as if I had won some contest. The cold beverage, however, began to turn within my stomach. It rolled and rose. The rumbling eruption found its way up my throat and out. Through my lips, falling back against the cabinets, I released my victory upon the floor. The liquid continued to flow from me like a fountain. First, it was golden like the beer, but grew darker as the spectacle continued. My eyes grew wide, and I was unable to make sense of what was happening. Beer eventually gave way to blood, and my kitchen floor was coated in a bubbly layer of my insides. I was sure that this was how I would die. That was when my body rose with a jolt from my bed covered in sweat. The nightmare had been so real that I could still taste bile and blood on my tongue.